When we talked about the while loop, the do while, the for loop, we said that the only way to really exit the loop is when the test becomes false. So next to the while, you had the test, that if this test is false, the while loop would end. And the for loop the same way, you have a test in the middle, and when this test becomes false, the loop ends. Now, sometimes as you're executing a loop, you might want to exit the loop. For some reason, you're exiting, of course, early before the test becomes false. For example, let's say I'm going through all my students' grades, one student at a time, and as I'm calculating one of my students' grades, I find that their exam grade is a -1. Now, I know there's no way in the world for the exam grade to be -1. It could be a 0 if they didn't attend, but it can't be a -1. So I know that something has gone wrong. And I don't want to just keep processing the information, processing my students. I want to kind of stop and see what's going on. So the break statement basically is just the word break with a semicolon. It can be used to exit the for loop or the while loop or the do while. Okay, so how does it work? You basically just put a break semicolon whenever you want to. So I would have like an example in my code. I would say, if the grade is less than 0, break. Something happened. So let's look at this code and see what it's going to do. Okay, and I'm going to do it with you on Paint here. I don't want you to read the notes right now, but let's look at this code. It's starting off with I equals 0. So I'm going to have my variable I set to 0. Okay, and then it's going to immediately go and test. Is 0 less than or equal to 10? It is. So it's going to go in the loop and it's going to check if I mod 2 does not equal 0. Well, let's see what I mod 2 is. So I mod 2. Remember, mod gives us the remainder. Okay, so if I take 0 and I say, what's the remainder when I divide 0 by 2? Well, it is divisible, so that is going to give me a remainder of 0. Now, the test is saying 0 does not equal 0. 0 is equal to 0. So 0 does not equal 0 is going to give me false. So 0 does not equal 0 is false because they are equal. So here, because it's false, nothing is going to happen. It's not going to go to the break. It's going to print out I. So here in our system.out.println, we're going to get I printed, which is 0. Then it's going to move on. It's going to increment I. It's going to do the update. So now I is 1. It's going to check 1 is less than or equal to 10. Yes, that's true. It's going to go and check if I mod 2 does not equal 0. Here I is 1. When I do 1 mod 2, what am I going to get? Well, I get a remainder of 1 because it's not divisible. Now, the question is 1 not equal to 0? Yes, they are not equal. So that is going to give me a true. Because it gives me a true, I break. Break means what? Means end the loop. That's it. I'm done. And so all this loop ends up doing is printing the number 0. So the break statement can be used in a catastrophic condition. For example, if you run into something catastrophic and you know that you can't continue, you would break out of the loop. You're reading a file and the file for some reason is corrupt, or the data in the file doesn't make sense. You just want to break out, issue an error statement. You know, you might have here like an error statement, system.out.println, something catastrophic happened, the grade was -1, and then break out of the loop. You don't want to continue processing when you know whatever you're going to do is going to be thrown away because it's not right, it's not accurate. The data is not accurate. So the break statement is used when you run into a catastrophic situation in your code and your code really cannot continue executing this loop and you want to end. Okay, so this is the break statement. Now the continue statement is a little it is kind of a little weaker than the break statement. What the continue statement does, and it's basically the word continue with a semicolon, is that it terminates the iteration of the loop that you're on right now. So like I said, if I'm processing my students and student number 6 had an exam grade of -1, the break would say just exit and stop processing this student and stop processing all the future students, and that's it. So that's the break. Now, what if I want to say, this student has a problem? So I will just skip this student for now. I will print a message saying that this student number 6, has a problem, and I would just want to continue processing the next student, 7, 8, and 9. So what I want to do is kind of end this this iteration of I, like if our variable is int I, but I want to continue with the next I. I want to end the iteration of this student, but I want to continue with the next student. That is what the continue would do. And so the same code is written, but instead of the word break, it's written with the word continue. So let's see what's going to happen in this case. In this case, we're starting off again with I equals 0. So we have our I, it's 0. We check 0 is less than or equal to 10 because it's a pre-test loop. We check first. It's true. It's going to come and check if I mod 2. So this is the I mod 2. That gives us the remainder, like we said before. And we're asking if 0 mod 2. 0 mod 2 is 0. Now, is that equal? It's equal. So not equal gives us a false. So it's false. So it's not going to do the continue. It's going to print I, and I is 0. So our system.out.println is going to print out 0. We go, we update our I, make it 1, and then check. It's less than or equal to 10, true. So we're going to go and check if 1 mod 2. So we've updated our 1, and we're going to check what 1 mod 2 is. Well, we said that when we divide 1 by 2, we're going to get a remainder of 1. Now we're going to ask ourselves, 1 does not equal 0? Yeah, they're not equal. So that's going to give me a true. And so because it gives me a true, I get a continue. Continue means stop what you're doing with this I. You're done. Skip whatever is here and immediately go do the update. So here I am not going to print 1 because something is wrong with 1. I'm not going to print the final grade of my student because something is wrong with the grade of the student. So we're skipping 1 and we're just going immediately to do the update. So nothing gets printed and my I now becomes 2. Now we're going to test 2 mod 2. Well, when I take 2 divided by 2, I get a remainder of 0 because it's divisible. So the test will give me a false because 0 is not equal to 0 gives me a false. So false means don't do the continue, do my print. So now I'm going to get 2 printed. I'm going to do my update. I becomes 3, and then I'm going to test if 3 mod 2. What's 3 mod 2? Well, when I divide 3 by 2, I'm going to get a remainder of 1. So the test is going to give me true. So true means continue. Continue means don't print. Skip everything here and immediately do I++. So for 3, it is nothing's going to get printed. And so when this loop continues, basically what it's doing, it's saying if a number is even, if the remainder is 0, don't do the continue. But if the number is odd, it gives you a remainder that's not 0. So if you get a remainder that's not 0, meaning it's odd, then I want you to, sorry, I got confused. If the remainder is 0, if I take a number and I divide it by 0, that means I'm going to not continue. So I'm going to only continue when this is an odd number, when the remainder is not 0. And it's not going to be 0 when the number is odd. So basically it's skipping the odd number. It's saying if it's an odd number, don't go ahead and print it. Now this is a hard way of doing it. It's convoluted. You know, having an if I mod 2 would have been, like without the continue would have been easier. But this code basically would print out the even numbers, and if it's an odd number that doesn't give you a remainder of 0, it continues, so it skips it. So this is the break and continue statements. Like I said, they are used to exit a loop. The break exits the loop totally. The continue just says skip this iteration of the loop and move on to the next one. So we've learned 3 types of loops, the while, the do while, and the for loop. How do you decide which one you want to use? Now, the only one that's a post-test loop is the do while. The while and for loop are pre-tests. They test first. So if you have like a menu that you want to display, or you have something where you want to do some code at least one time, you would use the do while because you're guaranteed that this code will execute at least one time. Now, the for loop, what you usually use the for loop for is counting. When I want to go from 1 to 10, 20 to 100. The while loop is the most comprehensive loop. It is the one that you can do more with, like input validation, for example, you would use a while loop for it. So basically you can do anything with any of these loops if you needed to, but if you do have code that you want to run one time, the choice usually is a do while. If you have a counting variable that's counting how many times I'm doing a task, or counting a variable changing from one value to another, usually we use the for loop, and everything else we would use a while loop for. So this is the end of the chapter. There's the classwork for this part, which is the for loop. This part has two parts. The first one is the first question says, ask the user for a number that's greater than 5 and print all the values between 1 and n that are multiples of 5. So if the user enters like 20, prints all that, so yeah, if the user enters 20, you're going to print 5, 10, 15, 20. So n is the number the user is entering. If the number the user entered was 23, you would still print 5, 10, 15, 20. Okay, so think about how you're going to do this. The simplest way is to think, what is the first number I want to print? Is it 1? Probably not. And then after you figure out that first number that you want to print, what increment are you going to? Can you just go in increments of 5? Or do you have to go in increments of 1 and test every single number if it's divisible by 5? So there is an efficient way of doing it and an inefficient way of doing it, and I want you to choose the efficient way of doing it. The next part, what you're going to do is you're going to ask the user for a number that's between 1 and 100. If the number is not between 1 and 100, you're just going to issue an error. You're not going to you're not going to say, like, try entering another number. You're just going to issue an error, tell them it's invalid. Now, if the number is valid, what you're going to do is you're going to print two things. You're going to figure out the sum of all the numbers from 1 to n. So if they enter 20, you're going to add up all the numbers from 1 to 20, and then you're going to figure out the average. Now remember, the average is the sum, which you already calculated, divided by how many numbers. So if they said the number was 20, you're going to add up all the numbers, and then the average would be that sum divided by 20. And then once you're done with that, there is a programming assignment for this portion of the chapter. It's available on HackerRank for you to test.